Howdy. Finally got a little bit of time to come out and work on the Mustang for Rocky Mountain Raceweek 2.0. This is, I think, the 5th video that I've made for updates on the car, and right now I'm really working on wiring. Wiring and electrical in general happens to be the area that I'm least talented. I'm not very talented with any of it, but it's the worst for me. Concepts are just hard for me to grab. Anyway, I'm working away on it, watched a ton of videos, lots of stuff. Motion Raceworks has been helpful. So trying to figure out how to get the car going, and I'll show you some updates here. I'm going to flip the camera around. Okay, so we have a couple new things under here. One, I finally got my new adapter in the mail so that I can connect the Terminator X external map to my 5-bar external map sensor. And I ran a new 0-gauge wire for my alternator. I had to pull the old alternator charging harness apart because as the factory had it, this wire came off the alternator, was the power wire to it, and it connected to this little harness. These plug-ins also plug into the alternator, and they basically turn the alternator on when you start the car so that it charges. So I need this stuff still. So I trimmed out the charging wire and rewrapped this stuff just with tape. I had to repin this whole connector, take it all apart, and reseal it up because the wires were all bare and exposed and touching each other. No wonder the car didn't set itself on fire years ago. I fixed it. So that's all together. That took forever. And according to some of the stuff that I got from Doug at Motion Raceworks, in order to set the car up so that to follow, I apologize for my mess. It's just been, today's not been a cleaning day. It's been a working day with what little time I had. But anyway, according to Doug at Motion Raceworks, to get this set up to shut off the battery, shut the car down, shut the fuel pump off, shut everything off, I have to isolate the alternator from everything else. I cannot include it in this master shutoff switch. So if I have power on like this, I need the track officials to be able to come up, hit that, and shut the car off. And if the alternator is hooked up the way it was from the factory, the car will probably not shut off. It's just like jump starting a car. It'll keep running on its own even though the battery's dead because the alternator is able to keep everything going. So I ran a new wire for my alternator all the way back to the back of the car, just like my main power wire here. One runs on one side of the car, one runs on the other side of the car, and apparently what you have to do is connect your alternator directly to the battery all by itself, and then you have your other power wire that goes down to your shutoff switch. Then I have a couple other, the power wire for the computer to run the car is supposed to go straight to the battery as well. It has a separate on-off switch, but the power supply is supposed to come from the battery so it gets a good signal. Apparently minor fluctuations in voltage can really mess it up. So, following directions here. And anyway, so that the way this is set up, when I have the switch on, my ignition system, the spark system, the fuel pumps, the electric fans, the old brain to the car, all of the electronics will shut off, and all of, those couple connectors that I showed you that turn the alternator on and off, those will be disconnected, but the charging part from the alternator will stay connected. It just won't charge anymore because now the rest of it will be isolated, and I can't get any feedback through this. Once this switch shuts off, nothing from the alternator or the battery can get back to the rest of the system. So it works pretty good that way. theoretically. We'll see. Anyway, so I've been working on all this stuff. It's quite a mess. I started running some of the wires, extension wires for the headsets, the rugged radio stuff, and obviously I've got the, well, not obviously, but I've got the Terminator power wires, and also my well, you can see my rough decisions for what switches we're going to do what. I've got my fuel pump. I know the Terminator can control the fuel pump. However, the way the Terminator harness is set up, the fuel pump control wires are way up there in that mess. And I do not want to take the whole harness apart and run one wire back there, so I'm just going to run the fuel pump on a switch. On, off. Easy enough. And I've got my transmission cooler, which it's a pretty cool unit. It's a remote mount, doesn't have to be in the front. It's got its own fan, so its own air supply and everything. This is a pretty hefty little unit. It's not as wide as I thought, but it's very deep, so it should cool really well. I'm looking forward to it. I've got a couple other extra ones if it needs more help, but I had to run the power for this thing. So one of the switches runs to the back where the transmission cooler will be. Let's see, my fuel pump is, let me turn my light on. My fuel pump's mounted under here, MagnaFuel 750, and then the transmission cooler will be over here somewhere. I don't know exactly where yet, but it doesn't really matter. There's flexibility to mount it wherever. So those wires are run. This stuff will be underneath the carpet, and I'll probably mount it in a couple spots to secure it. Started running some of my power wires to the main system itself, and I figured out where everything else is going to go. I've got accessory control. This is just going to be like a phone charger or LED lights, small things like that. The pink wire, that's the actual remote turn on for the Holly system. I've got my starter switch run, and that's this purple wire come up here, that comes up here that way, because the starter just sits right down there on the passenger side. So when I actually have the starter connected and bolted on, I'll be able to just trim this to length and run it down there to the solenoid on the starter. So nothing too crazy, I don't think. I just hate doing this part. But I've got more to do. I've got my rugged radio power wires, this gray wire that comes off one of these switches, and that has to all be connected here. And I don't have any of the Holly stuff set up yet. These are both power wires. They're going to come into my junction here and then go right back out to the fuse block that the car came with, so that my headlights will work, and all, everything else in my windows and all that will work like normal. So there's lots of, for me, that stuff can be a little tricky. For most people, it's probably pretty simple, but it takes some thought on my part. So today was a very slow day for me, because I've got my ground wire for the switch panel that I need to coil up and get in there, and that's just going to go to the ground side, which I'll ground to the chassis, or maybe to the roll cage. And that is actually another thing that I updated as well. I wasn't too happy with the little, when I was redoing all of this, and I saw how big these 0-gauge wires are compared to what I've had in the car forever. These are 4-gauge wires. I thought that's not that great. So I'm going to leave this, it's just a sheet metal ground here for 4-gauge. But what I also ran is a separate 0-gauge up to a tab that I welded onto the roll bar for another chassis ground. So I should have good grounds all the way to the front. And yeah, fingers crossed anyway. So we'll see how that works. But that's about all I did for today. Doesn't sound like it'd be more than half an hour's worth of work, but it took me a long time. But I'm getting there. Thank you to Allison and James for surviving for a little while so that I could come out here and work on this. I know with everybody being sick, it's been difficult for me to come out here without helping as much in the house during this couple hours I've been out here. So thank you, Allison. Thank you, James. Also, thank you to my mother and father-in-law, Bobby and Dana Fuchs, for helping out with Allison and James as well as they needed it during the week, so that we can survive all of our day-to-day stuff and then still have some energy to come out and work on this piece of junk. But slowly coming together. That's all I've got for an update for now. Thanks for paying attention or skipping around or whatever on a longer video. Take care and have a good night.